I'll give you the floor. On your friend Vinny, I've always heard you refer to him that way. I'll give you the floor on his legacy and passing. Al.
Well, I would say he was probably as influential as anybody in my life in terms of, what happened with me and my career, because it all started as a kid growing up in Brooklyn, and we could actually walk to Ebbets Field. And the first thing I ever remember in life is my father taking me to a Dodger game. On a weekend afternoon, we walked over to Ebbets Field, and I was enthralled just walking into the place with, how beautiful it was and how green the grass was and the signage on the outfield walls. And at one point during the game, my father pointed to what was the broadcast booth, and it was an open-air broadcast booth at that point in the front of the upper deck. And Vinny was there with Red Barber, a classic announcer, and then a guy named Connie Desmond, who was also very good. And I looked at them, and I thought, I think the first kind of conscious thought I had was, I want to be here every day. I just want to come here every day and somehow get in for free. And, of course, thought about at that point maybe, you're going to get paid. This is going to be your job. So that's the first thing that I can recall. And Vinny, of course, had to be in his maybe first or second year as an announcer. And then growing up in Brooklyn and going to the games and listening to the games and falling in love with, with Barber and Vinny and listening to every game. I was destroyed when the Dodgers then left Brooklyn. But ironically, my father got transferred in his work in 1958 to Los Angeles. So I didn't miss a beat. I heard Vinny's entire career from the time I was a child until the very end, of course, when he ended it in 2016. I was beyond honored to at Dodger Stadium to introduce Vinny and a lot of the Dodger greats who had come to celebrate the beginning of Vinny's final season. I first met him in Hawaii when I called his hotel room, and I was starting my career, and I knew he was on vacation at the Kahala Hilton.
Come on. Hold on a second, Al, because I was going to ask you that. Like when you first met him, what? You knew he was on vacation, so you called his room?
We're in Honolulu, and somehow word had come down. You kind of knew everybody who was coming to town at that point.
Sure.
This was, 68, 69, or 70, and I very nervously picked up the phone and, called the hotel room and introduced myself. And I said, I know you're on vacation, but is there any chance I can bring a cameraman over and do a short interview with you for the sports on Channel 4 in Hawaii at that time? And ironically, I'll just throw this in parenthetically, Chuck Henry was the news anchor. So Chuck, who's now on Channel 4 here, Chuck and I go all the way back to that time. Anyway, he couldn't have been more gracious. I went out there and very nervously interviewed him. I was giddy, and I got a 4 or 5 minute interview with Vinny. And then I next saw him when I got the Reds job. I'm doing Cincinnati in 1971, and one of the great thrills for me, Rich, was when he asked me to be a guest when the Reds went to L.A. that year on one of our trips to be a guest on Dodger Warm-Up, his pregame show, which I, of course, had listened to 1,000 times. And here I am being interviewed by Vin Scully. So through the years, obviously, we developed a great friendship. We belonged to the same golf club. I had many, many meals with him through the years and talked to him so often. And down the stretch of his career and his life, we would talk a lot on the phone. He was, extremely complimentary. I would do a football game, and he'd call me and he'd say, "Oh, I just loved watching the game, and you were great." And it never ceased to thrill me to hear Vinny on the other end of the phone. And of course, it's one of those things right now where I have about 4 voicemails on my machine from Vinny, and they will never be erased. So in terms of, being my idol, which he was, and helping me, become, what I've become in terms of a broadcaster, learning so much from his style, his rhythm, and most of all, I think, Rich, his naturalness. He had just a natural way of broadcasting the games, and there's been very few figures as beloved as Vinny as you can well tell from all of the testimonials that we've heard and read over the last 2 days.
The brilliant Al Michaels here on the Rich Eisen Show, a couple days after the passing of his friend and colleague, the iconic Vin Scully. So, Al, you're the perfect person to ask. What made him so good at what he did?
A lot of things. I go back to that naturalness. He didn't sound like a guy playing announcer. He was your friend, and he was narrating the game for you, and he did it in such an eloquent and fantastic way. He also taught you the game. I mean, I learned more baseball from Vinny, as did probably millions of listeners through 3 or 4 generations. I learned as much from him as from anybody. He taught you strategy. He taught you about the players. He taught you about the history of the game. And he was able to weave this in. And, of course, everybody's talking about what a great storyteller he was. Of course he was. But in addition to that, his play-by-play was fantastic. Just his way of describing the game. And it was and the sound of his voice and just the rhythm of his voice and how he did things. It was comfortable. And that's what you strive to be. What all of us in this business are hoping to be. You don't want to be an annoyance. You don't want to be cacophonous. You want people to say, "Get the hell out of here." Vinny, was welcomed in to millions of homes, over 67 years, and you'd be hard pressed to find somebody who truly felt that Vinny wasn't an announcer that you would really love to hear. And he brought so many things to the game, and he was so obviously well prepared. But the fact that I think, Rich, also that he could take a run-of-the-mill game, an average game, and God knows he did, thousands and thousands of games, and there were a bunch of those. He could take that game and turn it into a great listen, a great broadcast. And then he could take a great game and turn it into an iconic broadcast. And in 67 years, I mean, as they say in sports, he brought it every night.